Red Gold and Bold podcast is live once again with you as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. We're talking about the most instrumental players. Now listen, we've taken Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones off the board. So who are the next 7 players that are the most instrumental? First of all, I think this is going to be interesting to see how it's defined by each of us, because I wrestled with it. Like, what is the most instrumental? But we took a shot. We're going to figure it out. Basically, who's going to make the difference on this team this year beyond the obvious. Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones. We're talking about it right now here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You are listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell is a columnist for the Kansas City Star. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. Off and running here, looking for the most instrumental players other than the obvious ones, Chris Jones, Patrick Mahomes. Doing it right now, guys. One of the things we always like to do is kind of review after going through the exercise, the process. Takeaway, Jeff, what was your biggest takeaway from trying to put this together?
I was very biased towards the offense, so I had to really go back and try to balance out a little bit more, but I felt like there were more I wouldn't say pressing issues, but I think more wild cards on offense. I think on the defensive side, there aren't as many variables, as much variance as there is on offense. So I felt like I was spending a lot more time trying to figure out. And there's some people on offense that didn't make it that people probably surprised people on my list.
Okay. Interesting. Sam, what was your takeaway?
Well, if all 7 guys on my list have great season, the Chiefs are going to be undefeated. Look, I define my list by who can most influence the Chiefs being good this year.
Okay.
The players that I think the Chiefs in some form or fashion are relying on to be good or could be good. It's not a prediction of who will be, but I just think who can most influence their record if they are productive this year.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like, hearing Jeff talk about, being heavily influenced by the offense was the mediocre side of the ball last year, right? So, like, in some ways,
last 2 years.
That last 2 years, yeah. I mean, in some ways, that's kind of intuitive. Like, okay, that's where they need to improve. That's where they can take the biggest jump. I ended up having a lot of defensive guys. I'm like, wait a minute, how can this be? How can they be mediocre on offense? And I'm coming to the conclusion that it's the defensive guys. So I think it's difficult. I think it's one that we may be all over the map with where we go. I think number one is going to be the same for everybody. But then after that, I think it's
I don't know.
I don't know either.
No?
How about that? Yeah.
Oh, I'll be shocked. I'll be shocked. I can't wait to hear. Like I said, I thought it was difficult. I thought it was harder than I thought it was going to be for sure. But I thought it was difficult. All right, let's get started. Who's at the top of the list, Jeff? Who's number 1?
Jalen Moore.
Okay.
And it would be easier to go with Josh Simmons, but I think Jalen Moore, I looked at him being instrumental for 2 reasons. One, if he can play, obviously it makes left tackle a much less of an issue for the Chiefs coming into this season, but also it allows Josh Simmons more time to grow and develop and not put a lot of pressure on him to start the season. So I think, they paid him a decent amount of money to come in here. He has been in the NFL for a while. He's been behind all-pro left tackle and Trent Williams, and we know left tackle is a huge, huge problem for this team. So if Jalen Moore can play he actually kills two birds with one stone.
The two birds being
Josh not having to rush Josh Simmons and making the Chiefs better on offensive line.
I see. That makes sense. Interesting. Sam, does yours at least does it connect with Jalen Moore? Because if it doesn't, I'll go next.
It doesn't. I actually assumed all you guys would connect with Jalen Moore, but not with Jalen Moore.
I did. So okay. I'll go now. So it sounds like you're going to go someplace different. So I'll stay on the left tackle side. I mean, I thought Josh Simmons was the no-brainer, right? And the reason I thought so was because I feel like Jalen Moore, is going to be okay, right? I feel like there's this much room for Jalen Moore. He's not got awful because you've seen him play at least 5 games for the 49ers, so I think he's going to be an improvement, but I think there's no ceiling. I mean, I find it hard to believe that he can be really good, that we're talking about, the second year. Boy, look at the Chiefs. They're giving him, $27 million times 5 years, right? Like, I don't think there's any kind of big upside, or the Niners would have kept him, was kind of my feeling. Now, the one caveat I'll give is that they are up against it cap-wise, and they're having to make a lot of drastic cuts. So it may have been like, listen, we love the player, but we just can't do it. And so I think that's the hope if you're a Chiefs fan. They did give $15 million for him, right? That was a pretty big check. But keep in mind, when they gave him $15 million, they didn't have Josh Simmons, right? If they could have drafted Josh Simmons and then gone through free agency, would they have given Jalen Moore $15 million, do you think?
There were other guys they could have given less money to who are probably going to.
The answer is they should. They still should have.
I think that's a fair point, because the idea being you don't know what you have at all in Josh Simmons. But for me, instrumental, I'm thinking of the biggest swing. I think we've got a guy who no-shows to a guy who could be, knocking on the door. I don't think you're going to get the Hall of Fame guy, but a guy who could be, Brandon Albert-ish, grab you a Pro Bowl or two.
But is that right out of the gate? We're talking about this year, not like overall. I mean,
I think the overall – well, I think if he's healthy – I think he could play at a
question.
I think he could. I think if he's what people have talked about him being, it will be more than Jalen Moore. So I think it's a big swing. So I think if instrumental, it's like you're going to get okay play from Jalen Moore is my expectation. If he plays better, I'm going to celebrate the man, and I'm going to celebrate the Chiefs organization for getting it done. Right? And if he plays great and they tell me how they knew it all along, I'll ask why didn't you sign him for 5 years. So let's. That's the other thing is, like, if they're so sure about him, he would have been signed for more. So for me, I feel like Jalen Moore is just kind of the security blanket, and Josh Simmons is the home run. And so I think if Josh Simmons is the best offensive lineman in this draft, if Josh Simmons is, Eric Fisher or better, which is what I think. I know he wasn't going to probably go 1-1 like Eric Fisher did, but it was a much better draft class with, to look at with some of the guys that were in this. So I think he's kind of a home run. He solves a lot of stuff if he's as good as they thought he could be. So I think he's.
Can he beat that on day one? Is what I'm asking.
No,
that's why he's not number one for me.
No, he's not going to be that great on day one. But on day one, he'll be the best left tackle if he is what he was when he was healthy and what people have said he was. He will be the best left tackle the Chiefs have had since the prime of Eric Fisher's career on day one, with upside being beyond Eric Fisher. Eric Fisher was a good left tackle. This kid, they talk about being a very good. That's my feeling.
Yeah.
So I think he can be better.
I'm not arguing that. It's just a matter of when it happens. Yeah, that's what I'm arguing.
You don't think an offensive tackle can be good in year one?
I think, given what he's gone through, it's a possibility he won't be good in year one.
That's what makes him instrumental to me.
Okay, so you're thinking
because there's a big swing. That's why I say
he won't be playing then, right?
If he sucks,
if he's not healthy, he won't be playing, right?
No, I think there's a very good chance he plays on opening day. I think if he's healthy, he should open at left tackle.
Okay, but we don't know if he's going to be healthy. That's what we don't know, right?
Which is what makes him being good instrumental.
Yeah, I took the question the same way Soren did, but the reason I have neither of those guys ranked number one is because both of them exist. And Soren, you called Jalen Moore a security blanket. There is a security blanket. I totally agree with you on Josh Simmons. If there was no security blanket, last year I think we all had Kingsley Suamataia ranked number one, for example. There was no security blanket behind Kingsley Suamataia, as the Chiefs found out over the course of 17 games and 3 more in the playoffs. there is a security blanket this year. And that's what those guys are on my list, but that's what prevented me from ranking them number one.
I think that's totally fair. I think that's because, I'm going to somewhat contradict myself. No, I'm not. In fact, that was, I'll tell you, like Kingsley Suamataia was on my list at one point, and I took him off because I don't think there's any difference between him and Hunter Norzad. And so I don't think there's any swing there. I think the backup's going to be as good as the starter, and I don't think left guard's really going to matter. So
you see instrumental more as just impact,
like how much
they can dictate the success of the team.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how
either way.
Yes.
Either way.
Yes. Like the Chiefs to get to their ceiling includes this player being great, basically.
But I'm okay with Jalen Moore being on this list because I think Jalen Moore may end up being the answer at right tackle. I think Jalen Moore is a guy, and that's long term, but I think even this year, like if Jawan Taylor is a penalty factory one day, they will stay, and they've sat him down when they didn't really have a good answer. They will sit him down and have a good answer, and they may never put him back in. So Jawan, I think Jalen Moore could take Jawan Taylor. So I do think Jalen Moore is. I have no problem. He was on the list at one point for me. He is down with Kingsley Suamataia and others for consideration. So I have no problem with him being there, and I really don't have a problem with him being number one. So who did you have one, Sam?
I've got Rashee Rice,
Okay.
number one. And the reason being is because we actually have the evidence of what this offense looks like without Rashee Rice. Last year, in the first 3 weeks, I went back and did the math today. He had 103 yards in week one. The Chiefs threw for less than 300. He had 75 of their 151 receiving yards in week two. In week three, he has 110 of 217. So those first 3 weeks combined, he accounts for 44% of their passing offense. And like I said, for other guys on this list, we don't necessarily have the evidence as what does it look like without this guy being good. We do without Rashee Rice. And he, for this conversation at left tackle, can offset some of the issues you have at left tackle. Not all of them, certainly, but he gives you an answer to, hey, the offensive line's not giving us time to throw the ball. Let's throw it to Rashee Rice. This surprised me, actually. As a rookie, the year that we all said he was still learning, he was actually the top-graded wide receiver on short throws on Pro Football Focus, the top-graded of any receiver in his rookie year, and he was on his way to absolutely being that way as in year two as well before he got hurt. And I just don't think the Chiefs ever recovered from his injury, at least with their passing offense.
I'll jump in here unless do you have Rashee Rice number two, Jeff?
No, but he's on my list.
Okay, I have him number two. So I'll go here. I mean, I have him number two for everything you said. By the way, I pointed out 130 catches, 1,600 yards, and 12 touchdowns is what those first three games had him pacing for. I don't think he was going to get to all those numbers, especially the 130. But I will say this. I think he's instrumental because I think he has to. Whenever he comes back, he has to very quickly become the number one receiver. And if he's not, he has to be number two to Xavier Worthy, right? Like I think he is absolutely vital to this team. And I think he's most likely to be the number one, the chain mover, the quantity of targets, which I think Patrick Mahomes needs. I think he needs a security blanket. And I think that security blanket, as we've talked about many times, needs to stop being Travis Kelce. It needs to be somebody who's not just going to catch and go down, which is largely what Travis Kelce is now at this point in his career. Sam, you've quoted it many times, only 3 broken tackles. So to me, somebody's got to move into that role. And the guy who's got the best chance, and you said it, last year he was emerging, is Rashee Rice. I think it's vital. And if it's not him, and I think he'll be instrumental in the sense that like how many games he's suspended is going to affect him. And he's going to be suspended against some of their toughest opponents. So, just the fact that he's going to miss games again for doing something really, really stupid is going to be instrumental, I believe, to this team. Now I don't think they're winning 15 games this year, period. They're definitely not winning 15 games if he only plays 3. So I think he's huge on that one. Jeff, who'd you have number 2?
Josh Simmons.
Okay.
And to me, they're 1A and 1B. And really, Josh Simmons, I flirted with this full disclosure here. Rashee Rice is 3 on my list, and I thought about putting him 2. But Josh Simmons moved into 2 because if Jalen Moore is not good and Josh Simmons is banged up and not effective, then we're right back where we were last year with this team. And that's the thing that people forget. It was like once they lost Kingsley Chadiha, Wanya Morris wasn't the answer. And I agree. I think Josh Simmons, if he is what he's been touted to be, will be a really good player. But in year one with that injury, I don't know what to expect until he's out there going against real defensive linemen. And if he is impaired in any way, if that knee injury haunts him in year one and Jalen Moore's not good, they got a big problem at left tackle and nobody else to really go to. So that's why he's number 2 on my list.
Yeah, I think interesting. A couple of people, Thaddeus said the offense needs to go through Rice. Rice was also an extension of the running game, right? But I think this one, if Rice stayed healthy, they still would have gotten smoked in the Super Bowl. He can't play left tackle, which is to your point, going left tackle, I think is, kind of the vibe that he's getting at right there.
Yeah, he's not a 3-touchdown player, but he's a player. And you can't say that the score would have been the same if Rashee Rice plays in the game.
Yeah, I agree. And who knows, maybe they convert some of the third downs that took them off the field and put the ball back in Philadelphia's hands. I mean, I can't stress how much, converting third downs means. I mean, there's a reason why coaches always talk about that, but and if you can not get to third down, that's even better. And I think he gave him that possibility. I do agree that, and I know, Jeff, you've got him at number 3. I do agree he's a massive impact.
I actually think the Super Bowl is the exact type of game they needed Rashee Rice because they had no time to throw. And again, as a rookie, he was second in the NFL in first downs on throws 10 yards or less. Second in the NFL on creating first downs out of those throws. He was first in the league through the first 3 weeks of this last year. Like, that's the precise type of player you need when you have no time to throw and the other team's playing deep shells. Is somebody who can take throws at the line of scrimmage and turn them into first downs. And they didn't have anyone who could do that whenever Rice was dead. So I understand the point. They do still get smoked in the Super Bowl, even if Rashee Rice is playing in that game. But that's also the solution you look for when your offensive line cannot protect.
I'll listen. The Philadelphia is the better team. I don't want to get into a debate of this, but I do think any weapon like that or anyone who could protect the left side totally changes the game, because part of that thing snowballed. The defense was not playing that bad, and the Kansas City Chiefs have been down by 10 points in most of their championships.
Well, all their Super Bowl wins.
And their losses too, because it got even worse. But they came back in those. And so the defense kept them hanging around, especially to the very end of the first half. And if they're able to convert some third downs, they keep Philadelphia off the field. If nothing else, they shorten the first half and keep Philadelphia potentially away from frenzying there at the end of the first half. And who knows what they get to in the second half. So look, Philadelphia won. There's no point in talking about. You can't go back and play it, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. But to your point, I think all of these players that we have named, if they're in that game, have the potential to drastically alter the tempo and pace of that game. Now, does it change the outcome? I'm not going to say that, but it would. You just converting third down and not giving the ball right back to Philadelphia is a giant part of the equation. Do that 2 times, it's a giant part of the equation in changing how that game gets played out.
I think the thing about Rashee Rice, 1, is how is he going to play after this injury? 2, you mentioned the suspension, but 3, can he be in that role where teams are willing to say, we're not going to pay as much attention to Travis Kelce now? And I think that was a big part of his fast start, was that Travis Kelce still commanded a lot of attention, and that showed up in Travis Kelce's stats. It wasn't just that he was declining, that teams were paying him a lot more attention at the start of the year when Rashee Rice was getting a lot more single coverage. Now, when you're rolling coverage towards him and you're game planning for him, how does that affect his production? But I still think you're right that of all the guys on this roster, he's the most impactful receiver they have.
Okay, we still have to get to Sam McDowell's number 2 on his list. We'll do that right after you hear from our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warning. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Northland Injury Law, Kansas City's Google 5-star rated personal injury lawyers, serving KC for more than 40 years, voted Kansas City's #1 accident lawyers, helping people with serious injuries from car accidents, work accidents, falls, and other personal injuries. Northland Injury Law doesn't get paid unless they get money for their client. Don't wait, get compensated now. If you have a case, text HURT to 22222. That's HURT to 22222, or call 816-400-HURT. That's 816-400-4878. The choice of a lawyer is an important one and should not be based solely upon advertisements. I guess it helps if I put us back into the mix there. Forgot about that one little part of it.
Show's over already?
We're back. We're just gonna look at the stadium for a second. Number 2 on your list, Sam. We've been remiss. Where are you at?
Yeah, I've got Josh Simmons number 2. The only thing I'll add is what almost prompted me to rank him ahead of Rashee Rice is if Josh Simmons is good, it alters your next 4 years and beyond as well. And I don't know if you could say the same thing about Rashee Rice. Since this was focused on this year, I still think that is a this year argument that you could make to rank him number 1. But the only thing I'll add about that is there's a big gap for me after number 2 with the rest of this list. These other guys definitely have impact. That's why I ranked them 3rd through 7th. But 1 and 2, I think, carry a lot of weight on how this team's going to play.
Yeah, let's stay with you on number 3 because we got Jeff's number 3 at Rashee Rice. So where did you go at number 3?
I went with Christian Fulton, number 3. And the reason being isn't necessarily actually because of his play, like being a all-pro player. He has to be good enough to start, because when you look back at the Chiefs defense last year, which was good, teams found a defense. And we've talked about, and Eric Eager, long before I was on this podcast, talked about defenses being weak league defenses, like teams will find it. The Buffalo Bills found Najee Johnson. Late in the season, teams found Shamari Connor. And so that prompted me to go back and look at some numbers with how the Chiefs defended the slot a year ago, for example. In 2023, so 2 years ago, they were ranked 3rd in the NFL in expected points added to slot receivers. 3rd best defense in guarding the slot. Last year, they were 29th, from 3rd to 29th in that stat. And what changed? Well, the personnel changed. Trent McDuffie was your slot cornerback. And now all of a sudden, you had Shamari Connor as your slot cornerback. So what Christian Fulton can do is keep Trent McDuffie in a slot on those key 3rd down plays. And so for me, he's really key to what they're able to do this year, because I think what last year proved is Jalen Watson can start when healthy. I don't know anyone else in that cornerback group besides McDuffie and Watson who can start and make Trent McDuffie play the slot outside of Fulton.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'll tell you that Christian Fulton did make my list. He's not up this high, but yeah, just what it allows him to do with McDuffie, the depth. And I think also I'll add in on this one, Jeff, and then I'll let you chime in if you got some thoughts on Fulton. But I think it also helps cover up Justin Reed, right? Like, I think if you get deeper on the corners, you don't necessarily maybe need so much coverage out of your safeties. And so I think it could lessen the effect of whatever they're losing from Justin Reed. If they can just line up and play man and not have to disguise everything and everything be exotic, and they can just cover better and just give the rush more time, then I think that helps across the board on everybody. So I do like Christian Fulton. Again, he's on my list in a little bit. Jeff, you like Fulton?
Yeah, no, I agree. He's on my list. He's not as high as 3, but certainly I thought one of the most underrated parts about this team's issues last year was cornerback. And I mentioned it many times.
You talked about it a lot. Yeah, you did.
And a lot of people didn't want to hear it, but it was just like Sam said, you go look at the stats, you go watch the games, and you're seeing it happen over and over again. And when you're playing really dynamic quarterbacks like the Josh Allens and the Lamar Jacksons, it stresses your defense in so many ways if you don't have 3 guys who can cover. And you saw that in the Super Bowl when, Jalen Hurts, a guy who can run, a good running game with Saquon Barkley, and then all of a sudden you got guys running free on deep routes, and I don't care who's back there. McDuffie struggled with AJ Brown in that game, and so they got a lot of teams on this schedule that bring the same issues. And so I do agree that Christian Fulton's a big part of it. If he can stay healthy and be effective, that's a huge win for them.
Well, I think what was interesting, Jeff, that you mentioned that is the teams that they struggled with their receivers were teams that could go 3 deep. It wasn't necessarily those teams that had one dude who could play. I mean, Cincinnati brought Jamar Chase to town, and Member Higgins was out for that game. Yeah. So they faced Jamar Chase, and Jamar Chase only had like 30-something yards in that game.
Wow.
They still have
Yoshi Boss had a good game
two touchdowns. And I think he didn't have a lot of yardage, but he had 2 key touchdowns in the game. Obviously, the Chiefs ended up winning by 1 point anyway, but it was those teams like the Bills who didn't necessarily have a number one obvious, but they were deep at that position. And so to your point, it's the good quarterbacks who said, all of my receivers are good enough to where I get to pick the cornerback, not the receiver. And that's what teams did to their defense in the back half of the season.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I think he's important, and I'll touch on him in a little bit. I'll give you someone different at number 3. I went George Karlaftis. And I think somebody's going to have to pick up the slack for Chris Jones, because Chris Jones either needs to play less snaps in an effort to try to get him to be more effective on the snaps that he's out there. The erosion is real. 15.5, 10.5, 5.5, or 5 even sacks. That has been the last 3 years for Chris Jones. And, we've heard, the Chiefs say, well, we got to get home, right? Like, the pressures are great. Sacks are better, right? Pressures are great. Sometimes quarterbacks complete passes under pressures. Sometimes they're incomplete. Sometimes they're picked off. When they're sacked, they don't go anywhere, right? And so they have to get home more. And I don't think Chris Jones, he can expect more than 10 sacks at best. I looked this up, and it's a little bit, when I dug a little bit deeper, originally I looked at it, how many defensive tackles have had 10 sacks or more at the age of 31? If you use Pro Football Reference's stat head, there are 5 guys. That's it. Now, you put in defensive linemen, you add in defensive end, you start seeing names like Trevor Price.
Do you mean 5 guys or 5 seasons? 5 players. So some players have done it multiple times.
Cam Hayward had done it twice, and then there were 3 other guys.
Right?
So just 5 seasons.
5 seasons.
Okay, because that's different than 5 players.
Aaron Donald had 8 at age 32. He did not have, I don't know what happened in his 31 season, but at 32 he had 8. That was his best. But I think if I went back and reverse engineer, because like I said, when I went and added defensive end in, Calais Campbell, first of all, a lot of old-time guys come in, because Pro Football Reference has gone back and been watching the games, and they're assigning sacks that are not official NFL sacks, but they're assigning sacks from having guys score the games that were played before the sack became an official statistic in 1982. So you will see guys, on there that are before the sack that you wouldn't expect. But like I said, I saw Calais Campbell. And Calais Campbell would play D-tackle. Trevor Price, he'd play D-tackle, but they had him listed at defensive end. And then I saw one of Cam Hayward's seasons at D-tackle, they listed him at 11.5. When I add in defensive end, they listed him at 12.5. So I'm like, okay, I don't know how accurate it is, but it appears that what they had done is gone and said, he got this sack from the D-tackle position. So if you went with a 3-man line, then is the middle guy the only D-tackle and the outside guy, the D, it's a little wonky. Yeah. But I think the overall premise is real. Chris Jones is slowing down. That's a fact. And I think D-tackles, while they may age well, I don't think there's going to be some bounce back 14.5 sack season where he's the guy. And they do need to get after the quarterback more. And if they get better coverage, which we just talked about with Christian Fulton, I think George Karlaftis is the guy who has the chance to put the quarterback on the ground the most. You guys know, you've heard me say it a million times about what Trey Hendrick's first 3 seasons were compared to George Karlaftis. Karlaftis has been better. If there's any kind of bump, he goes from being 24 sacks, basically 8 per year on average, 110 sack season. If he has that breakout year with like 14, 15 sacks, then I think it makes a big difference. And I think it makes Chris Jones that much better. So I think George Karlaftis can aid the pass rush if he takes a big step forward.
So you got a higher floor for Karlaftis moving forward.
I don't think that. I think the floor is super high, but I think there is ceiling still left based upon some players that have kind of blossomed, and he's clearly shown
ceiling's high,
an ability. But I think the floor is high too. I think he's going to be good, but I still think that in defensive end years, there's still a chance for him to become great. I think they can kind of blossom at this point in their career. You don't like it, Jeff?
I think he's okay. I mean, I'm fine with your logic. I think that if he is better, clearly he's going to be instrumental. I just don't know if he's got that in him. I think what we've seen is about what he is.
Okay.
I think the best argument for him is that he gets one-on-ones, and the Chiefs defense is set up to where you have to win one-on-one. And if he does start winning one-on-one, then what can it do for Chris Jones? Because look, Chris Jones is going to be 31. He's not going to be better, I think, at 31 than he was at 30, 29, and 28. I will push back a little bit on him slowing down as a fact, because he did lead the NFL in interior pressures last year. His win rate was above 18%. It was between 18 and 19%, which is basically in line with what he was the year before, when he had, 10 and a half sacks or whatever number it was you mentioned. And it wasn't even that far off from his 15 and a half sack season. Joe Cullen a week ago, the Chiefs defensive line coach, said, you've got to bring down the quarterback when you get there. And I think that's where Chris Jones needs to improve, is when he gets there.
Agreed.
He's got to sack him, because he still, by these pressure numbers, like, he's still getting there. And you've got to turn those into sacks. The pressures are a great indication of you getting there the next time. But if you continue not to make that into something, like, that matters.
He on July 30 turns 31. Why do we think 31? Because I agree, he is kind of the king of getting, of sliding down a quarterback's hips, right? Why do we think that would be any better this year, though?
Well, I wouldn't predict that. Like I said, I wouldn't predict at 31 he's going to be better than he was at 30, 29, and 28. I do think any sack thing is like, they're all small sample sizes, basically. Like, you just don't get that many opportunities to where, if 3 more of his 75 pressures last year wind up into sacks, like, it looks like a pretty good year. And still, look, he still was a first-team All-Pro player, because I think opposing teams recognize this stuff. But like I said, pressures are a great indication of your future ability to beat that guy and do it again. And pressures still affect plays. Guys get rid of it. I think quarterbacks stare at Chris Jones more than they do an edge rusher, and so they're more prepared to throw it away, throw it in the dirt, whatever it might be. But it's when you continue not to bring the guy down, the sacks are a better indication of how much of an impact did you actually have on the play.
I think that's fair.
Sacks and drives.
I agreed. And I think it's important. I just don't think there's any chance that, what would you say if you had to predict a number? And what would you predict for sacks on him this year?
Oh, I think
what last year. 5, 6
last year. I would say 8.5.
Ooh.
Okay, Jeff.
I'd probably go 5 or 6.
I'm kind of in
triple team.
5 or 6 sacks for Chris Jones.
Yeah, I just think he's good. I think he's going to be the central figure of everybody's game plan, and so I don't think he's going to. So if he's getting close to 10 sacks, he's dominating.
Well, that's why Soren's got George Karlaftis.
It is
right.
I agree. I think, and I think they're going to be effective in handling. They're going to be more effective, because I think he is going to slow down. I remember talking to Will Shields, and Will Shields was still playing at an incredibly high level, but he was into his 30s, and I'm like, man, Will, because like I'm in the same age range. I think we might be the same age, over 1 year apart. And I remember asking Will, I'm like, how's your body feel at this age? Like, I said, he goes, well, how does your body feel? I said, well, I said, it's funny you mentioned it. I was getting in the shower, and I said, I stepped up to get into the shower, and I could.
Where's this going?
And I could feel my knees. I'm trying to step over the bathtub edge at an old house then. I stepped up over the bathtub edge, and for the first time, I could feel stiffness in my knees. He goes, I feel the same thing. And, like when you're a great athlete, one, you handle it better. Will Shields was, Chris Jones is. And I think you have the knowledge of the game and the techniques down, and there are ways to compensate. And he will age well, right? I don't think he's going to fall off a cliff, but he won't be the same. Like, it begins. He is eroding.
You
And
see
there's
him
nothing that
standing
can
up
stop
more in the run plays and all that stuff. Yeah, when
He's
he's jammed up,
always
he's
played
like,
too high.
I
He's-
think a lot of that's been his game. I will say,
Yeah.
so I just looked it up while you were talking, and this surprised me a little bit. So his pass rush win rate, the stat that the Chiefs love to quote with OmarNorman-Lott because he led college football in that.
Right.
Last year was 18.1%. Year before was 18.9, and his 15.5 sack year was 18 even. So last year was higher than his 15.5 sack season, which is what I'm saying. Like, these things are small sample sizes, and it's why teams look at this pressure number.
That's a great point. It really is. It is.
But I still think George Kalafdis belongs. Well, I'll prove that I think he belongs on the list somewhere.
Okay. I like it. All right. Up next, let's go. So we're through 3 each. Jeff, where you go at number 4?
staying with offense, Xavier Worthy. And, we mentioned Rashee Rice and the importance there. I think Xavier Worthy is a tick below in terms of importance just because he's going to have a chance to play all 17 games. And he's got to stay healthy. And he's going to have to make that leap that people are expecting him to make in year 2 because he showed more versatility in his game in the second half of last season. But there's going to be stretches there where he's going to be the guy having to do the heavy lifting in terms of being the top option in the offense if Rashee Rice is suspended or if he's not as good, because of the injury and because Travis Kelce is aging. I don't anticipate Hollywood Brown vaulting into that role. And so I think we don't talk enough about how much is going to be on Xavier Worthy's plate coming into this season and the moments he's going to have to step up and be a big time player. Had to do it last year on the fly, and I give him grace for that because it's tough to do some of the things he had to do without having the experience level. But he's played a year, and when they need him to step up, he's going to have to do it.
Yeah. Do you have Xavier Worthy here, Sam?
Not here, but he's on my list for sure.
But I'll go because I do too. I have him at number 4 as well. And I think part of it is, like you said, if not Rashee Rice, it better be Xavier Worthy. We're also looking at year 1 to year 2 is the biggest jump year for wide receivers. Second is year 2 to year 3. And then after that, it's not going to happen. It's generally the rule of thumb if you haven't emerged. And you've got Rashee Rice, that we talked about, who's going year 2 to year 3, but only played 3 games in year 2. So it's almost still kind of like year 1 to year 2 with him. And it's year 1 to 2 with Xavier Worthy. So there's no training for the combine. It's all just football training. It's a chance to rest your body and get things going. And now he's been through it all. And now, presumably, when Rashee Rice comes back, and if there's a healthy Hollywood Brown, he has a chance to get some single coverage. And he is the guy that can take the top off the defense. And they have to. They're talking the game again about going deep. We've mentioned that in the last couple of podcasts about what they're doing. But I think he's got a chance to, basically be the game breaker that, they haven't had. And this is the year. There should be no excuse with the other weapons around him for him not making some Tyreek Hill plays. And if he doesn't, either there's a problem with his play or Andy Reid is not finding the solutions as far as a play caller. I do want to say that. They have now given Andy Reid a lot. Right? There's no excuse this year for the offense. And I don't care if all they do is throw it short, great. But they need to get back towards 30 points per game. The offense needs to get back to being a strength because they've got a hugely expensive right guard, the most expensive center, an expensive right tackle, a first-round pick at left tackle that everybody in the organization says when he's healthy, he's more of a top 10 pick. They backed that up with a $15 million tackle. They've got a second-round pick that they thought was left tackle grade at guard. They've got a first-round pick at wide receiver. They've got a second-round pick at wide receiver. They've got another guy that they gave pop for more money on because they think he's good. They've got now the second or third most expensive tight end, whatever Travis Kelce is going to be. He's a Hall of Famer, and he's going to at least be good for the tight end position. Can we agree there's some pressure on Andy Reid here? What does he not have? If you want to say what he doesn't have is, Saquon Barkley, agreed. That's the only thing you can point to, but they have turned and burned and been a great offense with guys like Darrell Williams and, even the first Super Bowl.
Damian Williams. Yeah.
Well, no, but Darrell Williams too. They put up numbers.
But you said the first Super Bowl. Damian Williams was the first.
No, but Darrell Williams I wanted to point out first because he's worse.
Yeah.
Damian Williams still though was Damian Williams even drafted?
I don't think he was.
No, and he was let go by multiple teams.
Yeah.
And
And Spencer Ware, they put up big numbers with Spencer Ware at one point. He was like, they have plugged and played with anybody at running back. So, Isaiah Pacheco is a good player, not a great player, but I do want to reiterate, there's no excuse for the offense to be 15th this year. There really isn't. Without somebody's ass getting fired. Like, you can't be 15th offensively and somebody doesn't lose their goddamn job. Am I wrong?
I want some butts.
Yes.
Second straight week we fired somebody on the podcast.
That's right. After Andy,
there is one, by the way, injuries. And we've talked a lot about this group with Rashee Rice suspension possibilities, with Xavier Worthy being 165 pounds, with Hollywood Brown's injury history, with an aging tight end, with Josh Simmons, who's been on our list. Like, that's the potential excuse.
That is completely fair. I don't. The injuries are a complete unknown that you never know about, and I'm glad you pointed that out because I think that is an important part of the equation. The offense is taking up, I will point out, 54% of the cap, 53.4% of the cap.
That's not much when you got the quarterback.
The defense is taking up 31.7%. That is a lot. Special teams and dead cap.
Oh, okay. All right.
Is my assumption, but I'm looking here.
Who's dead cap on this year's team?
No, hang on. Yeah, I'm right. 90, basically $99 million on the defense for 31.7%. The offense, $167 million for 53.4%. It's not dead cap. It's just then let's see, where do they
Well, Bucker's got a new deal, right?
Yeah, but Bucker's making like $6 million, which of that cap is nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I just stopped open, so I haven't really studied it. That would be
not 15%.
No, I'm assuming that it's going to be on a dead cap number. I'd have to look at it, but I'm just coming off Spotrac's numbers.
Oh, Tooney is dead cap this year.
That's what it is.
Yeah, Joe Tooney's like $10 million on the dead cap.
Well, and you can throw that on the offensive side as well if you want.
Yeah, and by the way, I think DeAndre Hopkins is a little bit of dead money they have too.
So, like, you've got 22% more on the offensive side of the ball. No excuses. Xavier Worthy needs to have a big year, period. That's my number 4. 4 for you, Sam?
Look, I like that you guys have premium positions. Jeff, I think all of yours are tackle, receiver. That's the way I wanted to go because those guys can have the biggest impact. But I've got Kingsley Suamataia 4th. And the reason being is we know what his backup is like. Like, Jeff's mentioned it more than any of us on this podcast. Like, Mike Caliendo did not have good days against Buffalo or Philadelphia, and we saw the impact that can have. And you mentioned Hunter Norzad, Soren, but they haven't mentioned Hunter Norzad. I asked Andy Reid, I said, do you consider this Kingsley Suamataia's job? And he said, no, it'll be a competition with Caliendo's in there too. And I'm not saying they won't give Hunter Norzad a shot, but he's clearly not getting the shot that Kingsley Suamataia is getting, or even that Mike Caliendo's getting. And so based on like pure, remember Soren, it used to be WAR and like VORP in baseball. You had the value over replacement player. The value over replacement player here is really elevating Kingsley Suamataia on my list, and that's how he winds up 4th.
Do you really? And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'll come back to. I kind of prefaced this a little bit ago. Do you think there's any difference between Kingsley Suamataia and Hunter Norzad?
I have them 4th because there better be.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
If there's not, that is going to have a major impact on their offense.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. Like I and the way he answered that question when you asked him, to me, really did pop because it was. I mean, you're a poker player. How'd you read his body language?
I think it's going to be Kingsley Suamataia's job. I think.
Well, I think it's going to be his job, but I also think he's kind of embarrassed by what he's saying. I don't think he believes like it ought to be. Like they preach competition all over the place. Well, we'll see. We're going to put him out there. We'll see. Okay, Mike Caliendo. I mean, I almost felt like is Mike Caliendo headed to being cut? And he's mentioning Mike Caliendo's name because they're thinking maybe we can get a 6th or 7th round pick for him, trading him someplace at the end of cuts. Yeah. Like this competition should be Hunter Norzad and Kingsley Suamataia.
We'll see. Look, mandatory minicamp is next week. And, I don't know what Trey Smith's participation, for example, will be. And therefore, you're going to have some guys with the first team that you might need two guards getting snaps with that first team and not just one. And it's an early indication for something that is 2 months away, or 3 months away now, but it still is an indication of where the Chiefs are now with that thought.
Mike Caliendo is 28 years old and making $1 million. How much do you think the Kansas City Chiefs think of Mike Caliendo?
Well, he plays center as well, so I do think that will help him.
So does Hunter-Norzad.
He does, but you're going to have two backup interior offensive linemen.
Yeah. Well, I if you used a draft pick on, one you didn't. They both. What were the PFF grades in that Bronco game? I think both of them.
Well, my point is, I think both of them. I don't think it's going to be a question of Mike Caliendo or Hunter-Norzad
on making the team.
On making the team.
But who do you think should be competing for that job?
I think everyone should be in the mix for that job. I think it's the mistake they made a year earlier with Kingsley Suamataia is, it was his before training camp really began.
Mike Caliendo's overall grade, again, it's Pro Football Focus. It's not the end all be all, but it's at least somebody taking a shot that pays attention to it and doesn't have a rooting interest. 44.8 for Mike Caliendo. Hunter-Norzad 67.8.
That's off the Broncos game or the whole season?
It's the whole season, but it's largely the Broncos game for Hunter-Norzad because he almost didn't play anything else. Yeah. So, I think it's of note. All right. Listen, if you are hungry, I think you should know this by now. Whataburger is open 24 hours. You can take advantage of great deals right now. Your favorites are back, Kansas City. Now for a limited time at all your KC Whataburger locations, get the mushroom and Swiss burger, 2 large beef patties, Swiss American cheese, fire-roasted mushrooms, and creamy au jus. How about the sweet and spicy bacon burger, 2 large beef patties, American and Monterey Jack cheese, bacon, grilled onions, and topped with sweet and spicy pepper sauce. Or grab the patty melt, even the honey barbecue chicken strip sandwich. They're all perfect with the Whataburger banana pudding shake. Remember, Whataburger's open 24 hours a day with breakfast served from 11 p to 11 a. And don't forget, you can get all your Whataburger favorites and more by downloading the Whataburger app with the QR code. Whataburger, proud sponsor of the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty, Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. All right, rolling on here. We are through 4 at each position. Jeff, number 5 on your list.
So sorry to cut it. Let me double up because I've got Xavier Worthy, and you guys have already mentioned him. So all the reasons you guys mentioned, the Chiefs have talked a ton about revitalizing their downfield passing game. I can't see how that happens without Xavier Worthy being a factor in that. And he was a factor in the playoffs after not being a factor in the regular season there. So he's 5th for me.
Okay, 5 for you, Jeff.
Kingsley Suamataia. For all the reasons, we don't have to rehash what we just talked about, but the only thing I'll add to it is just that I just think the psychological blow of him failing at this spot would just be it would be tough for this front office, this coaching staff to deal with that. I just think that he's got to succeed here. If he doesn't, then it's going to be a lot of scrutiny on this guy. I think he's done.
I think, Jeff, you mean if he wins the job, right?
If he wins the job. If he wins the job and he's not good.
Well, when he plays 20 snaps in the preseason, how is he not going to?
Yeah, that's right.
So you're predicting they're going to increase his preseason workload then?
Yeah, I thought that's what he had last year was like 20 or 25 snaps.
That sounds all right.
I think, he's like, that is one of the things I'm watching is like, are they going to go do the same thing? Is Jalen Moore, Josh Simmons, and Kingsley Suamataia going to sit and watch all 3 preseason games? Because it didn't work well last year, right? So I'll be interested in that. I've got at number 5, Jaden Hicks. And I think it's, he's got big shoes to fill with Justin Reed. I do think that, Christian Fulton, which I'll even just kind of swing around here, snake draft style, and say Christian Fulton's number 6. I think Christian Fulton, as I said before, can take some of the pressure off Jaden Hicks, but Jaden Hicks is still going to he's got big shoes to fill with Justin Reed. And I think he's a talented kid, and I think he's got a chance to make that impact. But they've had that veteran safety, and they're putting a lot on a young guy here to try to make it. I mean, it's been a long time since they didn't have somebody who'd been around the block a couple of times. And so I think there is a chance that bombs and that torpedoes because he has to be good, because we know Brian Cook gets beat a lot. So you can't have 2 safeties constantly getting beat there. It's great if you have corners, but they'll eventually work your safeties. So I've got Hicks, and everything you guys said about Christian Fulton, he's my number 6 on the list as well. Any rub with Jaden Hicks?
He was my last cut. So if we had 8, he would have been number 8 for me.
Okay.
He's my 6.
He's your 6? Okay. Yeah. So we're in the same boat there. All right. Okay. So let's go to Sam then for number 6.
I've got Jalen Moore 6th. Jeff had him 1, 2. I thought it was going to be unusual to have 2 offensive tackles in this list. Jeff had him 1, 2. Yeah. But the only way Plan B matters is if Plan B is actually effective. And the point with Patrick Mahomes that I've made over and over again is he does not require all-pro left tackle play. He requires not worse than the league tackle play that the Chiefs had a year ago. Like, if you can touch the guy and slow him down at all, he can be an effective quarterback. And I think Jalen Moore has given the Chiefs a new floor. I totally agree with Soren that I don't know that he's given them necessarily a new ceiling, but he has given them a new floor going into this year. And like I said, the only way that matters is if he is that guy. If he's not, and you are relying solely on Josh Simmons to be healthy, that's problematic.
Okay. I think it's fair. All right. So number 7, Jeff, where do you go at number 7?
Christian Fulton. Back-to-back secondary guys for all the reasons you guys said. I'll just weigh in on Hicks just because I agree that without Justin Reed being there, it's a huge, huge burden on him. And even though I thought he played well and has a bright future, that's a lot. Spagnuolo puts a lot on his defense, and you're asking to pick up a lot of things as far as mixing coverage and disguising blitzes. And I think about the issues the Baltimore Ravens had last year with their safety situation, and they ended up benching Marcus Williams, and they had to move Kyle Hamilton back to the back end from playing in the slot. It helped them out, but for the first half, they were giving up all kinds of big plays because of busted coverages, and that's a huge, huge factor in this league. Again, Sam talked about just you start seeing teams with really dynamic offenses and big time quarterbacks and a bunch of weapons. It's going to be hard to shut that down. So if Hicks can't handle that part of it and Fulton can't stay healthy, I don't care who's rushing the passer. It's going to be a long day because you're going to see a lot of – they're seeing what? Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, obviously, Bo Nix. The Sean Paytons in the world, the Jim Harbaughs, those guys, that advantage the Chiefs have had with coaching in this division is gone now. And so people can really exploit their weaknesses. And so if they can't get the back end figured out, it's going to be tough.
Last on your list, Sam, who?
I've got Karlaftis 7th. And like I said, it was really tough for me to decide between Hicks and Karlaftis. The reason I went with Karlaftis is because even if his backup in terms of Ashton Gelati winds up being a player, you still need 2 of those guys. And he's still going to play. I think if Shamari Connor's a better safety than he is a cornerback, which I do think he's a better safety, that you've got a little bit of cover there. For Jaden Hicks, I would put him 8th. I would put Hicks 8th. But the deal is teams are going to continue to double team Chris Jones. And if you've got 2 other guys who rush the passer, I think Gelati is going to play a lot. If you've got Gelati rushing the passer and Karlaftis can both rush the passer, because I consider Gelati here too, because you know what Karlaftis is, right?
Yeah. If
you get some pressure from Gelati as well, maybe Chris Jones doesn't get quite the attention he gets, or you're just winning one-on-one on the edges, which is never a bad place to be either.
Yeah. All right. I like it. Obviously, I had him even higher, so I'm a fan of it. My number 7, Isaiah Pacheco. I think we know what Isaiah Pacheco is, but he still has had just 456 carries. And I know he's had some injuries. Herm Edwards was big on like up to 1,500 carries, so he should still be in his prime if he's healthy. When he kind of burst onto the team in 22, they were still a top shelf offense. And I think they have to be effective in the running game. I think he should be better at catching the football. They should come up with a reason to get him the ball. And I think with the receivers and the investment in the offensive line, why would he not be good? Like, again, I want some butts. He averaged 4.9, 4.6, and 3.7 carries the last 3 years. The 3.7, I'm willing.
That could really be taken out of context. So
that could be. Just don't. The 3.7 is Isaiah Pacheco, is the injuries to Isaiah Pacheco. There's no reason for that. If he's healthy, and I think it's important that he be healthy because I don't think you want any of the other guys being the guy, then he should go over 1,000 yards. I mean, I was looking back at our bold and daring predictions. Like,
we're doing bold and daring already.
I'm not predicting it, but this is instrumental, right? And I do think part of the
bold
problem
and instrumental.
He was 310 yards. What'd you say?
Bold and instrumental? Is that what we're going to call the podcast?
No, we're doing instrumental here. You don't think that Isaiah Pacheco
instrumental, but not incremental?
You don't think Isaiah Pacheco rushing for 1,200 yards and 8+ touchdowns?
Maybe in this offense?
Yeah, no. You don't think that should happen?
No, I think not with this group. Kareem Hunt almost made my list, and I think he's potentially more instrumental because I think without Kareem Hunt being a part of this offense, I think Isaiah Pacheco's impact goes way down.
I don't think there's any chance Kareem Hunt is the lead back on this team, and if he is,
I'm not saying lead back. I'm just saying supporting the offense in a way that Pacheco can't.
Do you think that Pacheco gets the playing time to have a 1,200-yard season?
I think yes. If healthy, yes. I think you will have the playing time. Is he effective enough? I don't know. Like, you can't – if they're in shell defenses, if they're playing no one get behind them, then they should be able to run the ball, right? Kingsley Suamataia is bigger. Joe Thuney is a great guard. He is a great pass-blocking guard. He is not a great run blocking guard.
Oh yeah, he is.
He's
great.
I think he's good, but I don't think he's great.
Yeah, we disagree on that. I think their interior line last year were as good as it gets as far as run blockers were last year.
Why did
not all of them being number one, but I'm just saying as a unit, it was tough to find. I couldn't find 5 units better than the interior that they had a year ago, blocking for the run.
I will come back to the investment they've made on the offense. There is no reason for them to not be able to be successful at every element of the offense. Number one quarterback. Part of the equation I didn't mention when I went through everything else. I'm not going to mention everything else again. There's no excuse for this offense not being good, right? None at all levels. None. There's no reason. Like I can't stress it enough. How much more do you have to give to that side of the ball?
Yeah. Sam's just thinking about Pacheco, 1,200 yards.
No, I mean, look, I don't think
Strun's the last runner had 1,200 yards.
Strun's not predicting 1,200, but yeah. I did really like premium position, running back.
Yeah.
I get the argument for Pacheco. I guess maybe I don't think that 1,200 yard ceiling is even there. Like I just don't even consider that in the realm of possibilities for anybody in this Chiefs backfield. And I also think a major reason for that is they know it, and therefore you're going to see these other guys play. And Pacheco's been hurt, and Kareem Hunt's old, and I think they know you can't ride any of those players as bell cow running backs, and therefore even if they are healthy, I just don't think you're going to see that kind of workload for those guys.
A guy who the first 2 years when he was healthy averaged like 4.7 yards per carry. You don't see a scenario that he can.
I don't think he's
go right by 1,000 yards.
Well, I think we have different history now than him as a rookie. I think we have the injury history that we didn't have as a rookie, which is what I'm saying. I think even if Isaiah Pacheco's playing well, I don't think he's a guy who's going to be on the field for 85% of the offensive snaps. I don't think he's probably going to be on the field for 75% of the offensive snaps. I think part of their calculus now needs to be, how much can we use this guy? Even if he is effective, how much should we be using this guy going into the year? That's a question they need to be asking themselves.
I think if teams are going to sit back, then they've got to be able to run the ball. They have to run for more yards, and they've got to play action. I do stress. I think there's a lot.
We've been saying that for years, though.
I know, and now, but early on we would say it, and they were still the number 3 offense, or they were the number 1 offense. They're 15 2 years in a row.
Yeah,
enough. Fix it. Figure it out. Like, the defense made their adjustments. Now you make yours. It's not because Brett Veach hasn't given you toys. Yeah. You got a toy box full. Let's go. That's why I really struggled with the 7th one. Like 6, I feel real good about. I'm not loving my 7th pick. But I mentioned.
I don't think anybody else here is either. To be honest with you. I think you're not alone in that one.
I mean, I had Charles Omenihu. I was thinking about OmarNorman-Lott. I was thinking about, like, okay, can he provide that pass rush? I thought about Noel Williams, just more coverage. I mean,
Hicks and Gelati were the other guys I thought about. Who else was on your consideration, Jeff?
The last 3 were Kelce, Kareem Hunt, and Gelati. I thought Gelati more than Karlaftis because he's just, like you said, he's an unknown quantity. You know, if he actually brings that same energy that you've seen in his college days, that could be interesting. But I think Kareem Hunt potentially has more impact on this offense than Pacheco does because he can do more
the other
stuff.
thing about Gelati, and I think what you just said, Jeff, had prompted me to think about it from this way is, you know, George Karlaftis obviously is playing on a team option next year, in which case if Gelati has a great year, you technically could have an extra $20 million on your salary cap in a couple of years. And really that consideration alone probably warranted him being on my list.
The likelihood that Ashton Gelati is going to be a difference maker in year 1 is.
What do you define? But you wouldn't be judging the complete difference maker. You'd be judging the potential, and you'd have 17 NFL games.
I'm not disagreeing with your assessment overall for the long haul. I agree totally with that. Yes, if he looks like he's going to be a player, then it does give you the ability to potentially walk on Karlaftis. I'm just saying, I think that the likelihood that he comes in and is a major impact guy for this team is not good. Not this year.
I think he's going to have to. I think he's going to have to. Like, he's going to have to play. I just don't he's going to. I guess what I'll say is I understand that what you're saying is the adjustment to playing at this level takes some time. I would counter by saying he's going to get the opportunity because that rotation has to include Ashton Gelati. And same for defensive tackle. OmarNorman-Lott's going to wind up playing more as an NFL rookie than he did as a upperclassman in college.
You said Kelce, and who else were under consideration for you, Jeff?
Kareem Hunt and Gelati.
Okay.
George Karlaftis had 6 sacks as a rookie. I think that would be a good year for Ashton Gelati if he had 6 sacks.
Clearly, great year.
And that would be the kind of year I'm talking about, to where you would say, okay, maybe we can walk away from this other contract.
You think that's possible, the 3rd round pick?
The 3rd round pick getting 6 sacks? Yeah. Yeah,
he's taking FAU snaps. I guarantee you, he's going to be in the lineup before over FAU. Yeah. So it'll be him, Dana, Omenihu, and Karlaftis are going to be the rotation.
I mean, Dana didn't have a great year last year, but he had to play because who else?
Yep.
And this year, it's you do have Omenihu back, but I think he'll get enough snaps to where you could potentially. And by the way, he can play inside a little bit too on maybe those 3rd down plays. I'm not predicting 6 sacks. I'm saying he'll get enough snaps to where that's possible.
That's fair. Listen, you can always support the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast by supporting our great sponsors like Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best for more than 30 years. One contractor, all things parking lot. Don't have liability issues in your parking lot. A brightly striped lot can help cut down on accidents, cut down on liabilities, let you focus on your business. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Kansas City's 5-star Google rated personal injury lawyers are Northland Injury Law, serving KC for more than 40 years, voted Kansas City's #1 accident lawyers. If you have a case, text HURT to 22222 or call 816-400-HURT. And if you're hungry, Whataburger's open. They're open 24 hours. They even serve breakfast 11 p to 11 a for a limited time. You can get the mushroom and Swiss burger, the sweet and spicy bacon burger, the patty melt, my personal favorite, or the honey barbecue chicken strip sandwich. Get them right now. They're only here for a limited time. Wash it down with the banana pudding shake. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network and NFL.com, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.